coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Steve. We got another fun episode for you guys today. We took a week off last week for Memorial Day, and now we're back at it. We're getting into that redraft season, talking about getting ready for the 2023 season. And if you're a redraft drafts, you might be coming up in August and all in that between. So let's introduce the crew today. Coach Jibbs, what is going on?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm so excited for a redraft season. Like, I preferably love redraft over dynasty. Some may hate me, but this is my kind of stuff, and I'm so excited to get into these players today.
Love to hear that. And of course, Coach John, what is going on, brother?
Nothing much. Another beautiful Monday. Get to talk football with my friends. We're doing bounce back players, which is huge in both redraft and dynasty. I mean, these are where you can, find some deeper guys in redraft. You can trade for guys in dynasty and reap the benefits later on. So this is a good episode.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about our content now, that it will work with both sides of the content at least. So we're talking redraft is going to help your dynasty season at the end. So, and of course we have our special guest, Bob Lung. What is going on, my friend? Welcome back to our show.
Doing good, man. Good to be back. Always enjoy chatting up with you guys. And a lot of great bounce back players to talk about. And, that's where the value is, right? I mean, that's always a big one. I mean, call it undervalued, call it whatever you want. Bounce back, undervalued, it's all the same. You want guys that you can get 2 or 3 rounds later that can get back to the numbers maybe they were last year or 2 years ago. And a lot of good group here you guys selected.
Absolutely. And of course, before we get started, Bob, why don't you let our listeners who might not know who you are, tell us who you are, because you're pretty popular in the fantasy football world. So tell us.
Yeah, I can be. I'm not as popular as Scott Fish this time of year, but But in
August. Now
we're talking. So as they said, my name is Bob Lung. I am the creator of the Fantasy Football Consistency data. The Consistency Guide is out on Amazon. You can get that if you've never seen it before. We're going to be talking about it a little bit today. But it helps identify the most consistent players that are out there. And if you don't think you need consistency, look at your team, especially those who scored in like the top 6 teams that didn't make the playoffs. I bet you got some inconsistent players. You can find my website, Big Guy Fantasy Sports, for all that data all year. All kinds of cool reports there. You can put in your own scoring method for your league. Figure out who the most consistent players are under that scenario, not just your typical PPR. And of course, I'm sure we'll be talking about it, and everybody is talking about it. The Fantasy Football Expo coming up August 11th through the 13th this year, Canton, Ohio. Last year we had 750. We're expecting 1,000 plus this year. Definitely make sure you get your tickets at thefantasyfootballexpo.com.
Yes, I've heard a lot of great stories. I think, John, you went the 1 year, right?
I went year 1. Yep. I sadly had a wedding year 2, so I couldn't go year 2, but if it was anything as fun as year 1, it was probably outrageous and a ton of fun. You get to hang out with a ton of your most favorite content creators, your favorite writers, all these different rankers, as well as just some other people like us kind of in the gray of it. So you get to hang out and talk football with everybody. It's a great community. It's fun people. It's just, look, we all love football. We all love fantasy football, and it's just a good place to come together and talk about it and be with some fun people that you get to spend a lot of time doing stuff like this, like Steve and Jibbs. I spend countless hours with you guys, but it's fun to sit down in person and grab a beer and actually shake hands and talk football. So anyone who can, I honestly, it is worth it. Even if you are new to fantasy football, just getting into it, it is a fun experience to get involved in and really see how this community has grown. And in no short order, thanks to Bob over the past, few years, I'm fortunate enough. I've been in fantasy Twitter and been doing fantasy football for too long now, but I've seen it really blossom over the past 3-4 years into a real community. And it's been great. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, ever since we got out of COVID, I think and I guess I'm pretty blessed that it happened that way, because kind of everybody wanted to get out of the house, and 2021 would allowed us that. And now that, continues to grow. But thank you, John, for your comments. And yeah, to anybody out there, just, heck, if you've never visited the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio,
oh, that's so.
And you play fantasy, now you got 2 reasons to come. And bring your friends.
The Pro Football Hall of Fame is great.
It's a nice small town, Midwest USA. Everything is 10 minutes from each other. You don't have to worry about, traffic and all that kind of crazy stuff. Prices, everything is very reasonably priced so that, you don't have to mortgage your house to come. And you can bring the family. I mean, the nice thing is there's a really nice vineyard close called Gervasi for the wives to go to. They've got a zip line and a Ferris wheel now at the Hall of Fame Village. Next year, they're going to have a water park. So now you can make a family vacation out of it for a 4-day weekend, send them off, dad, mom, if you both play, great. And it's really a great time. And I really hope everybody can make it and meet all of us. It's really a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, definitely check that out, guys, if you want to go, because I hear great things, obviously, about it. So, but let's get into our today's topic, guys. We were talking bounce back players who maybe underperform to what we believe their value truly could be, and we're going to see which players we expect to bounce back to that high value for 2023. So, Bob, you were first up. Who is your first bounce back player?
My first bounce back player is Justin Herbert. Last year, as you see, finished 11th in total points. Consistency was 53%, which was terrible. But let's also remember that this guy hurt his ribs in like week 3 or 4, and toughed it out all season. His top 2 receivers were missed, I think, each at least half of the year. And yet he still came in the top 12. Just 2 years ago, 2021. 3rd in total points, 3rd in consistency. The best thing about him this year is where you can draft him. If you've done any drafts yet, best ball drafts, online drafts so far, you're seeing Mahomes, Burrow, Hurts, and Josh Allen all going in rounds 2 and 3. Herbert's still going around 5 or 6. If you can load up on your wide receivers, running backs, and then get this guy, and he bounces back to 2 years ago value, it's going to be gold. And he's my favorite quarterback to draft so far in these drafts that I've done.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to sort of remember, and quarterback is one of those positions, especially for fantasy scoring. They are so dependent on, players around, wide receivers, players around them. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, both in and out of the lineup all year. It's hard to get in a rhythm. It's hard to get, some serious multi-touchdown games going when your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 are just banged up or in and out of the lineup. So I agree. I think Justin Herbert's an awesome bounce back candidate. I think the addition of Quentin Johnston helps. I mean, their offense is just the only thing I will always say, it's always a Chargers thing, is when they stay healthy, and every piece is O-line is intact and everything's looking good, they're going to be one of the top 5 offenses in the league, I think. And so if they do bounce back that way, Justin Herbert will easily be, quarterback 11 is the lowest I think we'll see him finish in his career. I don't see him going lower there. That was a bad season last season, and he's still quarterback 11, which is impressive.
Yeah, you would have fooled me if I didn't think he was quarterback 11 last year. So, like, if he's QB5, QB6, oh my God, sign me up. I'm with Bob.
Yeah, no, fifth, sixth round is a perfect spot to get your QB1 at that point. I mean, he has that elite upside of that. Some of these other guys are going in 2, 3, or 4, and you can get them in 5 or 6. And hoping the Kellen Moore offense really opens up. We saw at times with the Cowboys, they'd love to throw the ball downfield, and I'm hoping they kind of unlock Justin Herbert a little bit more moving forward in his career.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that, because I kind of forgot about the Kellen Moore, because a lot of the problems last year was also Joe Lombardi limiting them. And now with Kellen Moore in there, that even just makes it even better.
Open up the passing. I love it. All right, Bob, give us your number 2 bounce back player.
All right, my number 2 is Najee Harris. It is funny when you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, he really was that good? Because I didn't think he was even close to that good.
On a week-to-week basis, you were probably
it was really rough last year. So 14th in total points, which again, not that good, especially again, just like Herbert 2 years ago, he was, as a rookie, 3rd in total points. But the interesting thing is that he was 76% consistent in his rookie season. He was still 76% consistent last year. Now, you have to get over about 11 points in a PPR format to earn a clutch game, which gets you your consistency. And yet he's maintained solid consistency, even with a bad offensive line, a bad quarterback. The whole team was just a disarray on the offense. And yet he still toughed out a 76% consistency. And the cool thing is his ADP, as you show there, is running back 13, overall 39. If you can go wide receiver, and maybe even another wide receiver, or maybe you got a turn where you can get him at 39 as your number 1 back after loading up on 3 receivers, man, you're in good shape.
Yeah, I like Najee. I love Najee, as the prospect. I love Najee as a rookie. The things that were concerning me going into last season were obviously he was very open about having an injured foot to start the season, which I think we can all agree we noticed, because once he started getting healthy and he shed that metal plate that he had in his cleat, he all of a sudden could move 10 times better. And it's funny how when you don't have a 2-pound lead plate in your foot, you are a better athlete. So I agree. I think Najee is, he's young, he's powerful. Tomlin loves, having a one-back system. I don't really think it'll ever be more than a committee maybe, but not a committee that is something that'll affect Najee to the point where you can't start him. So really the only question for me with Najee is going to be touchdown upside. How good do we think this Steelers offense is going to be? Can he get to that double-digit touchdown universe? And if he can, then sure, he'll blow. He'll be top 12 RB again. Because he's going to get 280 touches. He's going to get, he's going to churn out yards because he is consistent. So the only thing that is, in my mind, affects his ceiling is touchdown upside. So hopefully Pickens takes a step forward. Pickett takes a step forward. Hopefully everyone in this Steelers organization kind of starts operating and this offense can go back to even being a middle of the pack offense. And then we'll see these, the goal line opportunities and these short yardage opportunities for Najee go way up.
Yeah, you mentioned, the second half of the season, he averaged almost 16 fantasy points a game, was 88% consistent in the second half when things started improving health-wise. And if he gets to those numbers, we're golden.
No, yeah.
And the Steelers made big splashes in free agency, improving their offensive line. So if they could get that working up front, boom, sign me up again. He was another guy on my list.
Yeah, same as me. Honestly, I'm a big fan of Najee Harris. Like trying to have him bounce back. I did an article on him, and the cool thing was when I was doing research on it was that you look at the first 8 games. He at his all-purpose yards on a 17-base season, it's just over 1,000 yards, a couple, 2-3 touchdowns. It was very minimal. And then if you look at the last 9 games with Kenny Pickett, obviously for the most part, you're looking at almost 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. The efficiency was so much better, and the offense played better with Pickett in that second half. They were more competitive, and if he can take that development, Najee will improve along with it. So definitely a good running back to bounce back, Bob. I like that one. All right, over to Coach John. Oh, my bad. Who do you got first, Coach John?
You can do it. I didn't know which one you had first.
The listeners didn't see it, so
I'm glad. All right. So it's funny because in the similar ilk to Najee Harris, the first guy I have up is Cam Akers. Cam Akers started the season off. Everybody knows he had that devastating Achilles injury a while back. Started the season off sluggish, looked slow. Then there was this weird sort of period where he was getting benched and the team was talking about cutting him or trading him or all this other, there was a lot going on with Cam Akers last year. Yeah. And so for him to come out after the team threatened to cut him, threatened to trade him, all this stuff, for him to come back in week 14 and I think it might've been even week 13, from week 13 on to just rip off 100-yard games, multi-touchdown games. He's averaging 6 yards a carry, back to like this elusive, explosive Cam Akers that we saw. He had long runs of 40 yards. I mean, he was doing everything we expected Cam Akers to do. And this to me is purely just hey, I think he really was still recovering from that Achilles. They forced him into a situation he wasn't ready for. And the team took it out on him, took it out on Cam Akers for some crazy reason. It's like, it's not Cam's fault that he tore his Achilles. And so, I think the Rams, if you look at their depth chart, they're stuck. They're tied to Cam Akers at this point. I mean, Kyron Williams, 7th round guy, I'm like not stressed about him. Zach Evans, not stressed about him. So it's Cam Akers' job to lose. And because there is such a sour taste in everybody's mouth, because of what the Rams said last season, because of their actions last season, it's, he is written off to me, especially in dynasty formats, as dead. And it's like, if you're going to take a chance on a guy to bounce back and be hyper productive in your team and all this, elevate into a weekly starter that you're psyched to have in your lineup, Cam Akers is that guy. Like, he just, to me, is like, if all of a sudden we get 8 weeks into next season and he's flirting around RB 12, 13, I wouldn't be shocked. And people will say, well, the offensive line is bad, and all. The offensive line was bad last year, and they didn't have Cooper Kupp, and they didn't have Matthew Stafford. So I just think that there is too much to go right for Cam Akers for him to not bounce back. Like, it just seems like an obvious one to me. That now, I'm not saying he's going to last, another 3 years in the league and re-sign with the Rams or all that. But if he has a good season, he could easily get a second lease on life somewhere else, similar to like a David Montgomery got. So I'm not totally off on Cam Akers. I'm not, overly pursuing him, but I think he is a perfect candidate to bounce back. RB22. So you're getting him as like a low-end RB2. And I really think that the ceiling is high-end RB2 with flirting with low-end RB1 potential.
Yeah, I mean, I like Cam Akers as a guy that if you're doing that zero RB approach early on for your 23 drafts and you wait until that, that later, like 5 or 6 round, if that's where you want to start, because everyone has their own approach when it comes to zero RB. But if you wait until that round 5 or 6, he has that upside where he's going to get probably 20 carries a game more time than not. I mean, you have an aging Matthew Stafford. I mean, he could be a perfect candidate for that kind of play. And we saw at the end of the last season that they were getting him 20 plus carries. He was running over 100 yards without any questions. So, yeah, I like that, John. It's a great player to have as a bounce back.
Thanks. I was nervous. This is the one that Cam Akers makes me nervous, because I tend to not bet on Achilles injured players, but he did show me enough towards the end of last season where I'm like, all right. And honestly, the Deonta Foreman having a little resurgence too makes me comfortable to think that, hey, maybe modern medicine is kind of, figured out this Achilles thing.
I'm not as hot as John is on him, but like if you're going like 3 wide receivers or you're going wide receiver heavy and you're getting other positions solidified, like I think could be a viable RB1. Like it is his situation to lose. So shout out Cam Akers, man. He won me a fantasy championship last year, so I can't be mad at the dog.
Nice.
Bob, how do you feel about Akers?
As somebody who's torn both of his Achilles, let me tell you, it takes a while to get back.
We got
40 years old and 155 years old. It takes a while, but you come back. It just takes a while. And you mentioned the last 6 games. So last 6 games, he averaged over 20 fantasy points per game and was 83% consistent in those 6 games. Again, if he gets back to that, his ADP works as a spot where, again, we could go 3 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds, draft Najee Harris in round 4 and Cam Akers in round 5. And man, I think that's a hell of a team.
I'm laughing my way to the bank if that's how I start my
team. Yeah. So, and again, some of the drafts I've done, best ball drafts, I'm seeing Akers fall that far. So yeah, it's definitely real. Now's the time. Now if he starts really kicking ass in preseason, probably will go up, because again, there isn't much competition there as compared to other scenarios that we have out there with, like Detroit, like Chicago, like, these teams that are kind of doing the running back by committees, which is the favorite thing to do. But yeah, I like Cam Akers. I have no problem as my RB2.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you there, Bob, that you need to, especially, I mean, redraft, it depends on when your draft is, but in Dynasty, like, now is the time to start knocking on the door to the Cam Akers manager and be like, hey, like, what would it take? Because if camp starts and he looks healthy and people finally catch wind of what the depth chart looks like, forget it. Then it's going to be too late to try and trade for Cam Akers. But now that everyone's kind of got rookie fever, everyone's kind of looking at the new hotness. No one wants to think about Cam Akers. Like, now might be the time to just ask. It's just worth the quick little sleeper, sort of notification. Just be like, hey man, what's Cam Akers cost?
I'll take him off your hands.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, Coach John, who is your second bounce back player?
So my second bounce back player is Rashad Bateman. And the reason why I picked Rashad Bateman, this could be, and I'll be honest, this could be a bit of a take lock. I loved Rashad Bateman as a prospect, loved him coming in. I just love him as a player, as a wide receiver. But what I want to highlight is what he did to start the season. And what was going on. Sometimes bounce back players are really kind of two things. It's either they underperform due to injury or they underperform due to circumstance and surroundings and I think that Rashad Bateman was kind of a combination. But yeah, he was injured and he's banged up, but also he's not meant to be a number one. He's not meant to be an alpha. Like, he is meant to be this dynamic, deep threat, take your shots. He'll break a slant off to the house, all these types of things. And so when you bring in people like OBJ and Zay Flowers to be your consistent, operate the middle of the field, do your outs, pick up the easy yardage, and then every once in a while you're going to float one to Rashad Bateman over the top. I really think that he could have this big resurgence of a boom or bust sort of wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 in your lineup. And again, those are sometimes guys that are valuable. You need guys that can win you a week. And Rashad Bateman catches, 4 for 120 and 2. And you're like, yeah, I just won the week. Thanks. Like, this is great. So it's not, and it stinks to say in front of Bob because I love him to death. He's not going to be the most consistent player. He's absolutely not. I promise you he will not be. But at this point, his ADP is so low. Wide receiver 47. I mean, he is like, this is the time to say at this point, he's going to have a higher ceiling than sort of anyone else in that wide receiver 45 to 50 range. Like, it's just, he might finish the year at wide receiver, 26, 30 if he's healthy, but he'll have a couple wide receiver 5 weeks. He'll have a couple, wide receiver 10 weeks. So those to me that's more important to me than a Rashid Shaheed, who is probably a very solid player. Awesome. Going to get 4 or 5 receptions for 40 yards, 50 yards. You hope he gets in a touchdown. And I just think at this point, when you're putting Rashad Bateman up against those types of guys, these, more of your possession, not as high ceiling, high profile players at wide receiver 47, I'll take the shot on Bateman and hope that, with Lamar, happy with his contract, Andrews healthy, Zay Flowers now in the fold, J.K. Dobbins a year further away from his injury. I mean, this offense could be really, really good. And again, if you have to single coverage Rashad Bateman over the top with a safety, he's going to win that more often than not. So I'll take my chance with Rashad Bateman at his ADP. It's low enough now where it's getting out of control.
I agree, man. That's criminal almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's definitely on my wall as a poster boy for inconsistency.
He's the worst.
But you didn't say that. You said he's going to be that guy you pick as your flex. You're going to pick in a best ball league for sure. And he's going to have those big games, but there's also going to be those games that, better defense, better safeties, better scenario, more speed. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to take the lumps, but yeah, I think at the value you get for him at this point is fair. And I totally agree from that perspective, but if you're looking for a consistent person to be your RB, your wide receiver 3. This is not him. But again, based on where he's going, I mean, wide receiver 47, that's if you get him as wide receiver 4 as your flex guy, yeah, that's a good deal.
Yeah. And that's kind of my point is it's like it's getting to the point now where when you needed Rashad Bateman to be your wide receiver 2 on your team, when you needed Rashad Bateman to, really put up consistent numbers, you felt the burns. But if you can now get him as your flex and you can kind of pick and choose when you want to start him, he gets a good matchup, you throw him in the flex and, you play that game. I'm much more interested in Rashad Bateman there than I was ever when people were saying, oh, he's be a solid wide receiver 2 with a low passing offense in Lamar Jackson. I didn't ever expect that, but I'm going to get him at wide receiver 50 off the board. Sure. I'll take he's talented enough at that point where I'll bet on the talent.
The other thing too, is he's got to be healthy. Last year he missed half the season. The year before that, he missed 5 games. So he has to stay healthy in addition to that, which has always been a big thing for him so far.
Correct.
Yeah. Why I probably won't be drafting him in many of my redraft leagues this year, honestly. I mean, yeah, he's definitely could bounce back from obviously 109. Wide receiver 3-4 that can be boom or bust. The target share is going to be interesting to see how they use him in the offense. I know as a rookie, he was a little bit more of that like chain mover, kind of got a lot of first downs as a rookie. Then this year he was a lot of deep balls downfield, and he caught 2 big giant touchdowns, one against my Dolphins. And it will be interesting to see without Greg Roman now as the offensive coordinator, do they really pass the ball that much more? Is it enough that Bateman is going to see 80 plus targets in a season? That's my concern with him. He could see 2 or 3 each week. Maybe once in a while, one goes up for a big game. But I mean, in terms of bounce back, it's good, but I probably won't be drafting him.
All right.
Jib,
now
over
it's
to you.
my turn. For my first bounce back player, I'm going to go with DJ Moore. I was actually surprised that he was a wide receiver 22 at the end of the last season. As you can see, you could get him at the 50 overall. So that's round 5. Like hypothetically, if I'm playing in a 3 wide receiver league and I'm taking some late round running backs and I could get him as a 3rd wide receiver on my team, I think it's kind of like the perfect scenario for you. But like last season, if you had DJ Moore on your team, God bless you. He played 17 games, and 9 out of those games, he has scored 10 or more PPR points. But those 8 other games were feast or famine, man. He averaged 4.2 PPR fantasy points in those other 8 games. And, like, don't get me wrong, like, the silver lining in DJ Moore's season last year was the 7 touchdowns, which was a career high. But, like, I'm happy that he's a Chicago Bears now. And I don't think it's going to, like, move the needle for him in fantasy purposes. Obviously, if he's wide receiver 21, that's kind of, like, fair market price. But I think DJ Moore being, like, Justin Fields' like, official weapon will, like, enhance him and his ability, and I think he could kind of beat maybe like a wide receiver, mid-range wide receiver 2 as like the complete upside of the this year. But I think he'll be more consistent this year, and he doesn't have to worry about that awful situation in Carolina that got blown up. So like I said, I wouldn't mind having him as my wide receiver 2, but if he's the 3rd one on my team, I'll be delighted.
Ooh, that's a tough one for me. I like DJ Moore as a player. I just wish DJ Moore played for a team where they have a real quarterback.
He's real?
Yeah, I'm not a big Fields fan, as you can tell. And I live in Ohio. But I think that the tough part for me is when you look at his ADP and you look at the players around him that you can also choose from, like Terry McLaurin or Jerry Jeudy or Michael Pittman. And you're like, DJ Moore in Chicago? I don't know if I can. I have him ranked as a low, high wide receiver 3, I guess, 25. So there's potential because he does have talent. The question is that, the team, the offense and the offensive coordinator, the coaches, they're all those people. They don't seem to want to do anything other than run the ball. And if it's a passing down, they just let Fields run the ball. So that's what concerns me the most is he really going to get the targets? Because nobody got him last year. Now, yeah, he's a much better receiver by far than a Chase Claypool or Darnell Mooney. Let's just hope they use him. I guess we'll just have to kind of see, but it's just hard to take a chance at my wide receiver 3 when I got proven veterans. Heck, even Calvin Ridley is around that frame. So that's what makes it tough for me. The talent's there. It's just the situation and the players around that scenario in a draft. And I go, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. I think DJ Moore I like DJ Moore as a player. I think this was a great football signing. I think this was good for the development of Fields. This was you needed someone to sort of steady the ship on this wide receiver core. But I don't know, really how much more there is for fantasy than there was in previous years. I mean, he's still probably going to see similar target volume. He's still going to see, it's not like he wasn't seeing any targets in Carolina. I mean, he was getting targeted. So I don't think he's all of a sudden going to jump to 150 targets in this Bears offense. So, he's probably floating around 110 targets, and, you hope he gets, again, 7 touchdowns. I like DJ Moore. He's a great player. It's just, I don't know if where there is to bounce back. I just think he's just going to be to me, he's just kind of developed into almost like a Jarvis Landry. Like, he's just in that wide receiver 17 to 24 range year in, year out, which fine, super solid. He's a great football player, but like Bob said, in the range where you can draft him, you can draft some guys that have potential to really elevate this season. Say Russ figures it out and Jerry Jeudy all of a sudden becomes a 140 target guy. It's like, that's a big difference maker. I don't know if DJ Moore will ever be that. But he is a great player. And I think he's not going to have those bad games anymore. I don't think I think he's just going to soak up 8 to 12 targets a week and be just fine and be, maybe not 12, 8 to 10 targets a week and be, just fine.
I mean, we're hoping that DJ Moore bounces back. I mean, that's the big thing. Obviously, we've seen it over the last few years with AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. Their talent made their quarterbacks a better quarterback. So we're hoping that DJ Moore can make Justin Fields a better passing quarterback. That's obviously the big kicker with DJ Moore, is if Justin Fields can take that level as a passer, he's going to be just fine. But obviously, until we really know, it's definitely somewhat of a concern, obviously. But he's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team that will have to pass the ball to some extent. So wide receiver 3 on your team, it can be risky. Probably would prefer him as a 4. He probably won't go as a 4 because someone will take him as a 3 because of his name value. But I mean, it's a, it's a risk reward kind of thing. You're hoping for the best, but it could end up being what we saw this year. So he was really good with Sam Darnold. I didn't realize that at the end of last year.
He tore it up.
Games at the end of the season with Sam Darnold. Maybe he should have went to San Fran or something. But yeah. All right, James, go to your second option here.
I will take my helmet off for this one. It's going to be Russell Wilson, another player who was just horrific last year. QB 16, as you can see on the slide. You get him as your QB2 hypothetically, or if you just don't even want to get a quarterback in drafts, like, I'm sure there's more upside players and that have more upside after that QB12. But like, I'm just making the case for Russell Wilson having a chance to be better than he was last year. Basically, the Broncos, the offense was miserable. They averaged 16.9 points per game. That's not doing anything for fantasy for any of the players whatsoever. And like, I'm not just going to blame it on Russ getting older. I'm going to blame it on the head coach. I think in his heavy run scheme approach. I think Hackett was in over his head at some times with the Denver Broncos, and now they have established coach Sean Payton. That's going to be the X factor this year. Like, Bob seen, you seen Steve. Like, he had 5,000 yard passing seasons with Drew Brees. Like, I'm not saying like Russell Wilson will be Drew Brees, and they're certainly going to reach that level. But with teams like the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers in the division, they're going to have to cook something up. And I think Sean Payton's probably going to be the best guy on that job. So QB 17, maybe he could finish as a QB, like at the tail end of a QB1, but like, that's my case for Russell Wilson. please get yourself a really established quarterback before you take this advice.
I love this call. I love this call because to me it almost different, a little different, but similar when you had Urban Meyer down in Jacksonville. Sometimes offenses and teams just can't overcome the chaos of a bad head coach. They just can't. Like it's really hard to run a football team. It's not easy, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And so when you have a guy who, like you said, Hackett, who I agree, I think was in over his head in terms of running a team and keeping Russ, with his head screwed on straight and not doing all this goofy stuff on a plane and, and all this other noise that can compound in a season and add up. And all of a sudden, we saw Russ play with no confidence, which is not a Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has always been this guy who has escapability, plays with some confidence. Like he never seems like he's going to lose on a play where mid-season was like, there's a shell of himself. And I think Sean Payton coming in is the right medicine for that, to say, no, you are still a good quarterback. We got to get back to your basics, back to your fundamentals. What do you want to do? This is the winning culture that we had in New Orleans, yada, yada, all that. Hackett doesn't know any of that. Hackett's he was a name. He was fodder. He was a quick hire for Denver, try and move the needle, and go figure. He was the first guy to get axed when they so I don't think it was fair to Hackett either but now they have a legitimate Super Bowl level head coach who can run the organization, get everybody on all 53 players on the same page. And now it is up to just the talent of Russell Wilson. And I'm with you, Jibs. I still think that Russell Wilson is talented. I don't think he just forgot how to play football in 14 months. I think he's still really good. Yeah. No, like you said, and I definitely agree on Wilson bouncing back because he has nowhere to go but up. He was 26th in quarterbacks in consistency last year, 33%, which is amazing because that means the other games he must have really been doing pretty well to be 15th overall. But you're right. I think you hit it right on the nose, John. This is exactly Jacksonville last year. Where Urban Meyer goes away, they bring in a real head coach in Doug Peterson, and Trevor Lawrence and them, takes them into the playoffs. I can see Wilson, Wilson's not as young as Trevor Lawrence, obviously, but getting his confidence back, getting that offense back to the Sean Payton that we know and love. Just please tell me that Denver hasn't signed Taysom Hill though, right?
No. Oh my God.
No.
I'm out a little.
Get the Taysom package.
Yeah, dear God. So yeah, I but you're right. I think Wilson's a great backup to have. Get him to pair with whatever quarterback you get. Doesn't matter. Because if Wilson starts off hot, man, you want to talk about some trade fodder that you can get with somebody whose quarterback doesn't start hot. And there's going to be a lot of those. So I think, this is a great call.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like the Jibs. Definitely a good call with Wilson. I mean, you even saw like at the end of the season when they cut, the head coach. He had three of his final 5 games. He had over 30 fantasy points. I mean, he started producing because he cut the coach out of the system. They cut this terrible play calling out of the system here. We saw Sean Payton bring back. Drew Brees was a lot younger, but at that time, Drew Brees was like, oh, he's done. His career is over, and then he turned him into a complete superstar. Obviously, different situation, but he has the experience and the head coaching, ability to bring Russell to getting that confidence back. So I like that there, Jibs.
Like you said.
Yeah. And I guess we're over to my bounce back players now, guys. It seems like. All right. So my first bounce back player is Jonathan Taylor. Pretty obviously, Jonathan Taylor finished 34th in running backs last year. His ADP right now is RB5, overall 11. So you're getting him in the back half of the first round, which I love for fantasy right now. And, last year he had 2 different ankle injuries that dealt him significant time missed throughout the season. You saw a big drop off in this offense with Matt Ryan at quarterback. He went from, 92 red zone opportunities down to 35. You should expect the offense to increase with Minshew and Anthony Richardson at quarterback. And if he took his 17 game pace over his average per game, you're putting up, close to 1,500 all-purpose yards and 6 touchdowns, which I would expect that to be somewhat similar to what he's going to be able to produce this year. Maybe a couple more touchdowns here and there. I think Gardner Minshew will start the season, so they're going to probably lean on, Taylor a lot early on, and he's going to see targets in the backfield. And then you have Anthony Richardson. And if once he gets on the field, things can happen in this offense here using both these players, because they're going to be a threat at quarterback and a threat at a running back. And if the defenses are focusing on Richardson because he is running the ball so much, Taylor is going to be an afterthought for a lot of defenses. So he's going to be, I think, a much better, more efficient player coming in this year. And while, with Richardson, we know he's not the greatest passer in the world, and we're concerned with a mobile quarterback using a running back in terms of a pass catcher. 3 of the 5 quarterbacks last year, 3 of the 5 mobile quarterbacks last year who finished top 5 in rushing. 3 of them had RBs finish over 40 plus targets. So I'm not too concerned. It's obviously not going to be what we saw with Matt Ryan the last year or two and that target share, but he should still be fine. He's definitely someone who's going to bounce back and be still an RB1. I wrote an article about, players that are in rookie contracts in their rookie year, in their final season, they usually perform to that kind of level. And he is finishing his rookie contract and is in a contract year. So he should be into that next level and really to get back to what we loved about Jonathan Taylor. So.
Yeah, this is such a great one. I'm glad someone mentioned him. You have to bring him up for bounce back shows. You have to mention Jonathan Taylor. So I'm glad someone did. I wasn't going to be the one to do it. So Jonathan Taylor is, the only concern I have, and to be honest, the concern's not that big of a concern because I think he's talented enough that it doesn't matter, is who's the quarterback and what's the offense going to look like. But Jonathan Taylor's talented enough when healthy that it doesn't matter. He'll still get his, he'll rip off a couple big runs. He'll still get his long touchdowns. I mean, he's that talented that it'll be really hard, again, because he is going to be a 280, 300 touch guy. It's going to be hard for him to slide, just like Najee. It's going to be hard for him to slide outside of the top 12 just because of the volume. It's so impressive when you have that much volume. So, my only concern is Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, just, helming the ship, but Jonathan Taylor is ultimately probably good enough to overcome it. So yeah, I in a world where he's outside of I don't see another world where he's outside of the top 8 running backs. No, next year. It's just, besides injury.
I think the difficulty I have, he'll bounce back. I'm not going to argue with that. No question about it. You miss 6 games. He'll get but where I think I'm having the biggest problem right now is drafting him in the first round. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's like, again, when you look at the receivers you can get that are very consistent, like an AJ Brown or a Stephon Diggs in the late, most of the late first round. I don't think Taylor's going to struggle from a point standpoint. I'm worried about his consistency when you have quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, which is what happened last year when he was healthy. They still had struggles because teams, Matt Ryan wasn't getting the job done. They were just a big mess. The offensive line wasn't blocking as well. Their defense was, it was just, I like Jonathan Taylor as a player. I just don't know if I can draft him at the end of the first round when I'm staring at top consistent receivers and I can get a Najee Harris in round 4 or 3. That's what I'm struggling with. Not that he's not a bounce back, but where he's going, I'm not sure I feel comfortable drafting him at the end of the first round with so much other talent around him.
Yeah, and I could agree with that, honestly. I mean, it is definitely a concern slightly to, pick him in the first round based on what other positions and, like you said, consistency is available at that time. So, I mean, if you get Hill, AJ Brown, Travis Kelce, if he falls that far, right. I mean, I kind of would rather have that upside and that consistency what they offer than what Taylor's offering.
Yeah, and it is surprising because as RB5, most of the drafts I've done so far, Best Balls and others, usually there's only 3 guys that go in the first round at running back, and it's McCaffrey, Eckler, and either Barkley or Bijan Robinson now. I have seen Taylor fall into the second round, and if he could be a late second round or a 2-3 turn, now I feel much more comfortable about that. You know, so again, it just depends on the drafts. We'll see how. I think he'll fall a little bit. The problem is that after number 5, you really get into a lot of question marks. And I think that's why Taylor is going as high as he is, because one, people either don't have the love for Najee that we do, or a Pollard or a Stevenson or Kenneth Walker, which I'm very comfortable with getting in round, 3s. But after 5, you've got Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Nick Chubb. Chubb's probably the most consistent. I mean, Henry can be consistent, but we don't know what's going on in Tennessee. We don't even know if they're going to keep him there. I mean, I've heard rumors that, heck, I just saw the other night that Des Bryant was talking about, actually posting, why don't the Cowboys go get Derrick Henry? What?
Right. No,
you had Ezekiel Elliott. Didn't you just have that guy?
Yeah, what do you
So anyway, like I said, it's messy. So I see why Taylor's probably going higher than he should, because there isn't much until you get into the, at least in our opinion. I'm going to take wide receivers as much as I can to load up on that consistent scenario. And then these RB2s or RBs, in round 4 and 5, there's some good players to be picked. And so I just don't see me taking the chance on Jonathan Taylor in round 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is this, fantasy players have this like false sense of comfort and confidence when you have players that get the volume that like a Jonathan Taylor has, that like Ezekiel Elliott used to get, that Derrick Henry gets. And you say to yourself, well, there's no way that anything could go wrong. And I even just said it 10 minutes ago, that there's no way anything could go wrong when you're going to get 300 touches. And it's like, yeah, but there could be. Obviously, look at Jonathan Taylor last year, got injured. The offense wasn't doing him any favors. And so when you add in the layer of you're passing up on Tyreek Hill, you're passing up on Stephon Diggs, when you add that wrinkle into it, I get why you wouldn't want Jonathan Taylor in the back of the first. You might, it's scarier because you're saying to yourself, Tyreek Hill is not going to get 300 targets. He's not, but he's gonna do a hell of a lot of damage with those 140 that he's gonna get. So it feels weird to say that and then make the call. But I think Jonathan Taylor is probably the last of these like bell cow. Then at this point, then you start getting into like you said, Ramondre Stevenson's and some of these other players who we project them to be a bell cow, but we don't know that, there's a world where it could not, or you get into, people like ETN that is probably committee, you get into
Breece Hall. We don't even know.
Breece Hall. We don't know. And so you're right. That is definitely probably driving Jonathan Taylor up this year specifically is every team has gone to a committee up. It seems like besides a handful Jonathan Taylor is the last of that handful.
Right. Well, there's so many good running backs that are in that 4th, 5th, 6th round, like Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Joe Mixon, who looks to be back.
Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, so why can't I just wait on them? Heck, even Jahmyr Gibbs is getting a lot of touches in, OTAs with Detroit. There's a lot of potential there to get points that if you have, you go boom, boom, boom and get some really good receivers in 1 and 2, maybe round 3 as well. And then you can draft those guys in 4, 5, and 6. It's tough. It's just tough to say I'm because you basically, if you're taking Taylor there, you want him to be 2021's numbers. I just don't know.
I think that's the name value of him being the number 1 RB. That's why.
He was the number 1 RB that year, 4th in consistency. I mean,
people remember those things. He's RB1. I want that guy. He
basically,
can do it.
when I do my rankings, the consistency is if to be worth a first round pick, they have to have 75 to 80% plus in consistency to be worth it. in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I do things. And so he was there 2021. Can he do it again? I just don't have that confidence. He could easily be 75. He might be top 5 in scoring, but then you just passed up on AJ Brown or Stephon Diggs, and and now you're third. Now you're picking your receiver in the 3rd, 4th round, and you're getting maybe Keenan Allen.
Right.
He's good, but he's also on the other side of 30. So I mean, there's just I don't know. I love Taylor. I think he's a hell of a talent, but I just don't know if I can draft him that early this year.
Yeah, it is
Kelsey.
It's a philosophy, and we're seeing the shift in the general fantasy player is I'll take my sure thing at wide receiver. I'll take the Jeffersons, the Chases, the Diggs, all these. When 5-6 years ago, it wasn't. The first round of your draft was all running backs. It was just running backs. The first round, maybe Antonio Brown and Julio Jones sneaked in there, but that was it. Now I think we're seeing a big philosophy change in the fantasy football community, fantasy football players, and they're saying, no, I'm okay with taking less volume as long as I can have the consistency and the boom factor of these Jeffersons, Jamar Chases, and all this other stuff. So exactly. I agree.
Last year, there were only 5 running backs who were 75% consistent or higher. Only 5. When you go and look at wide receivers, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm still going.
Wow.
13, 14. I mean, wow. Actually 50 when you throw in Godwin, who was 93% consistent but didn't have the points. And like you said, it's just tough, and I remember Bob Harris talking about this too. He said, fantasy sports world is fantasy football owners, players are finally realizing what the NFL has been realizing for years. It's a passing league. You want to win, you have to have the top receivers more than you need the top running backs. And so this devaluing the running backs, which we're seeing now. And everybody, so now you can go Jamar Chase and get an Amon-Ra St. Brown or Deebo Samuels in round 2, and maybe Devontae Smith or T. Higgins in round 3. That's a hell of a start. I mean, and Calvin Ridley, like I said, is floating out there too, untouched. I've done a couple of best ball drafts, and I'm getting Ridley as my wide receiver 3, and I'm in shock.
Right.
Because people just like, oh, we forgot about him. Did you remember what he did 2 years ago? With Matt Ryan at quarterback?
I know.
So,
oh, God.
Yeah, it's tough, but I get it.
Definitely. All right, let's get over to my final bounce back.
Yeah, I forgot you had one more. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, we just eviscerated Jonathan Taylor.
It's all about Jonathan Taylor now. I said this is the last player of the night, guys. So obviously my next bounce back player is Deontay Johnson, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. Finished wide receiver 39 last year. ADP this year is wide receiver 33, 73 overall. I mean, what can there be say? He's been the target machine there in Pittsburgh the last few seasons now. And last year, 11 of 14 games, he saw 7+ targets with Pickett. And when Pickett got into the starting lineup, especially in the second half, you saw a little bit more consistency in Deontay Johnson's target share and fantasy points, while he didn't score once in 2022, which is unbelievable. I don't understand how hard it is not to score at least one touchdown as a wide receiver, especially as
especially with all the targets he had. It was crazy.
Exactly. So it was definitely crazy in terms of that notion there. But I expect this team, we talked about Najee Harris and how this offense should hopefully take another step forward. I think that is with Deontay Johnson. He's still only 26, 27. He's in the prime of his career. I'm not overly concerned, obviously, with Allen Robinson. I'm not overly concerned with George Pickens to take a leap that will leap Deontay Johnson. I still think this is Deontay Johnson's team, at least for another season here. And he should get in the end zone this year. Last year, his last final 9 games with Kenny Pickett, he projected almost 900 yards. If he can do it just a little bit more consistency, he should probably get over 1,000 and probably see 4 to 5 touchdowns next year, which should put him in that borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. And again, you're getting him a little bit later in the draft as a wide receiver 1. This could be a player where if you want to go 0 wide receiver early and get your tight end quarterback and a few running backs, he's a guy that I can trust, I think, personally, as a wide receiver one because of the target share on the offense. It wasn't great last year, obviously, in terms of receptions and targets and the production he had. But again, I'm going to blame that a little bit on how this offense ran and expect that Kenny Pickett takes a step. Diontae Johnson's going to improve on that consistency a little bit in 2023 for me personally. And I like him a lot going into this season. So.
Yeah, I don't think you should be afraid of George Pickens. I think they operate in different realms of the field. I think George Pickens taking a step forward and advancing as a wide receiver would help Diontae Johnson. I think it would open things up short and intermediate for Diontae Johnson, which is where he thrives. I mean, he's a tactician of a route runner. He can put people in a blender in a phone booth. So if you can spread out the defense, and so he's not getting swarmed on the second he touches the ball, because he's not a big guy.
Right.
That's good. That's a good thing for him. So I'm not scared of Pickens at all. Anyone who wants to trade away Johnson because of Pickens, and you're not doing it right. But if you're afraid of Pickett, that's a different question. Like that's a different question. If you're saying to yourself, I don't know if Pickett can, support a top 10 running back and 2 top 24 wide receivers, then that's a legitimate question, because everyone's sort of projecting Johnson and Pickens to be these, top 30, top 25 guys. It's like, I don't know if Pickett and that offense will have enough yardage and touchdowns and everything else to have Freiermuth and Najee and all these people that we expect to be, predominant fantasy players. It's like a lot hinges on Kenny Pickett. Can he become Kirk Cousins and throw 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns? Can he do that? Like, I don't know. I hope so. And if you're betting on Diontae Johnson, that's kind of more the bet you're making. Diontae Johnson, super talented, gonna see 120 plus targets, no problem. It's just, what is the same thing I had with Najee is like, what is this offense? How many touchdowns are there to go around? How many yards are there? How many 3 and outs do they have? All this stuff adds up. And so I love Diontae Johnson. I think he's great. I think he's a very solid player, good bounce back candidate, because the touchdowns are, it's crazy that you have 0, like you'll have some. So he'll bounce back. He'll definitely bounce back. And I believe that, because I am also in the camp of, I believe Kenny Pickett can become at least a middle of the NFL quarterback. And if he does, then all these people will be fine. If, Pickett becomes more of a Sam Darnold, then you might be in some trouble. So I love this call though, because he is someone that it's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's not a fun name to roster. He's always sort of forgotten about, but in Dynasty, and like you said, young 27. In Dynasty, you throw a late second at someone for Diontae Johnson, like I'm taking that all day, every day.
Yeah, no, I'm a big Diontae Johnson fan. Have been since he started playing, and he's done really well. Just 2021, where he was 8th in total points and 94% consistent, in that year. And then the funny thing is, everybody was down when Pickett was coming in, which I get, rookie quarterback. He certainly lost the consistency in that, but I think it really was more the offensive line that was killing him because they didn't have time to throw. Najee Harris wasn't running well. The whole team, like I said, was quite a mess last year, and he still placed in the top 36 in both consistency and total points. I think Pickens does get better, and as you said, John, will certainly help that situation so he can take some of the defense away, and so they can't focus on one or the other. And I think that will certainly help them. And Freiermuth is good enough to keep the middle happy too. I think he's a great wide receiver 3 to get. This is one of those guys where if you want to go maybe wide receiver, go 1-2, and then maybe get your running backs, tight ends, that kind of stuff. This is a good wide receiver 3 to get, in round 6 or 7. So yeah, I like Diontae Johnson. I think Pickett does continue to improve. They got a hell of a coach in Mike Tomlin. This guy's proven over and over that he can do amazing things with personnel that you would never thought he could have done it with. And they're always very competitive. I'm very jealous of him as a Browns fan. I always have been. But yeah, he gets the job done. And I think this team will continue to get better. And it's they're playing in a AFC North that's going to have a lot of offense. The Bengals, Browns will be better with Deshaun. They're supposed to be throwing the ball more. Baltimore will be putting up some points. So, yeah, they're going to have to score points to keep up.
Yeah. Coach Gibbs, anywhere?
Hey, man, I was gloating on Kenny Pickett last week, so I'm definitely on board with Deontay Johnson. I just like to mention, it's kind of funny that they're between him and Pickens are 6 spots away from each other. So it's kind of giving me that Rams scenario back in the day with Cup, Woods, and Cooks. You don't know where to place them, but you might hit a reward with one of them. So I'm definitely on board with Johnson over Pickens because there's more history.
All right. Cool. I like it. All right. So that is going to wrap up our bounce back candidates. Hopefully all 8 of them bounce back. We'd love that this year, obviously. So we're going to call out here. Bob, you were a great guest as always on our show. We appreciate you jumping on. You have a lot of obviously great intake on a lot of these players, and we obviously love having you on. So I will let you say anything you want to say now. The floor is yours.
Just again, thank you guys for having me. Of course, everybody out there can meet us all. Hopefully, all of us will be there at the Fantasy Football Expo in August. Go to thefantasyfootballexpo.com to get your tickets. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Bob_Lung. Expo is at the FF Expo. Big Guy Fantasy Sports is the site for all your consistency data. And of course, don't forget to get that Fantasy Football Consistency Guide on Amazon. And it'll be there for all summer. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. So definitely please check that out. It is a really great experience to go take it in. So Coach John, anything you got to say?
No, I just want to compliment Bob again. Thank you for all the work you do for the Expo. It's amazing. And, I don't want to undershadow or overshadow the consistency guy, because when I was first getting into fantasy football and taking it serious and doing my projections and started a podcast with my friend Brian and we would always, consistency guy was a must to have in our rotation when we were doing any sort of evaluations, rankings, all that. And so I think it is a major factor that some fantasy analysts and some fantasy players kind of shy away from or tend away from, because they don't, the word consistency sometimes has a bad connotation in fantasy. And it's no. Consistency is good, man. You want people who are consistent.
You want upside. We all love upside.
You need upside. For sure you need upside. Go get Bateman for your flex, go get Bateman for your flex, but don't have Bateman in the first round. So that's where the consistency comes into play. And when you have these decisions of, a Jonathan Taylor versus Stephon Diggs. I mean, that seems like an easy no-brainer question to people. They're like, oh, JT. And it's well, when you look at consistency and you factor in a whole bunch of other things, maybe it's Stephon Diggs. And so it's just another great tool to have in the toolbox if you want to be a serious fantasy player as well as a serious fantasy analyst.
Yeah, thank you.
And Coach Gibbs.
It's been a pleasure, Bob. I would like to also say, I also used your consistency guide last year in a couple of drafts as the deciding factor when deciding between 2 players that in the same position at least. So thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. And great episode, guys.
Absolutely. All right. I love it. So again, guys, thank you all for listening to us today. We appreciate it as always. Please go check us over on our YouTube channel. If you're not listening on YouTube right now at the Fantasy Coaches, subscribe to our channel. We'd appreciate it. Give us a 5-star review and anywhere you listen to your podcast, if it's how you're listening to us. Of course, go over on Twitter and follow us at Coaches Fantasy. We'll be back next Monday talking last chance players. Same time, 5:30 p.m. Monday nights. So until then, guys, thanks for listening and have a